This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 6 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I'm your host, Gordon MacLelland. I'm delighted to be joined today by British Gymnastics national head coach Barry Collie. Barry, thank you for joining us on the show.
A pleasure and a privilege.
Now, looking forward to this one, we're going to have a chat about how we help support the development of confidence, self-esteem and self-worth in our young athletes. But before we get into that, Barry, can you just tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, your background, what you're currently up to now?
Yeah, my name is Barry Collie. I'm Scottish. I was born in Scotland. I lived there till I was 16. And then I've spent the last 30 years here in England. I live in Yorkshire. I love Yorkshire. It's my home. It's where my family live. I'm a gymnastics coach. I was a gymnast. I sort of moved from Scotland to follow my dreams to becoming an international gymnast. Pursued that for many, many years and then retired at 23. And then, throughout my gymnastics, I coached. And so, coaching's become a real passion of mine. And I'm very proud of our nation, our flag, and the sport of gymnastics. So the natural progression was to take a job as national coach around about 20 years ago. And I sort of worked my way up the ranks. Started with working with very, very young children and parents at the development end, and then moving through towards juniors, and had huge success with our junior team. And then, finally sort of following that whole path right through to young adults and watching young adults be successful on the world stage. And then, 6 months ago, I landed my dream job, which is head coach of the men's artistic program.
Amazing. And I mean, such a good, I guess, career already. And I think the nice thing for me is, again, you've seen all of those stages from the youngest athletes all the way through those teenage years, and then what it sort of comes down to at the very top end of sport. And I think that's important. There's so many different stages that kids go through, obviously changes in what they're trying to do and trying to achieve. I think that experience is invaluable, particularly for today's talk. And we're going to look at,
I think as well for my children, it's been invaluable as well, because I'm kind of the lessons that I've learned with these fantastic gymnasts. I now have a young family, which I'm kind of applying all the lessons and things that I've learned with these gymnasts and success and failure, resilience, in order to bring up my children in the best way I can.
Yeah, and those experiences are invaluable. I mean, I think you're lucky at this stage, Barry, not trying to paint this picture of doom, but at the moment, with the age of your kids, they'll be pretty much hooked on every word that you're saying. You've got to go through that lovely phase, however, where you'll go from being the person who knew everything to the person who knows nothing. And all those teenage parents that are listening will know what I'm talking about. And that'll present its challenges when the world, according to Barry, has absolutely no impact whatsoever on you.
Not many people. I actually have an elder son who's 21. And so I have fully experienced that in the I think it shaped a little bit how I'm a parent. I was a very, very young father, and it was a difficult relationship, and that relationship parted ways. But I've experienced that with Jude, my eldest. I've gone from being probably hero up until, sort of 15, 16 to now, where I don't hear from him, which can be quite difficult at times. And, he's his own man, and I love him very, very much. But, it's just opposite ends of the spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that stuck out for me, a couple of posts on your LinkedIn profile, and I thought, we'll get Barry on the show to talk about this, because as you say, you've just sort of, I guess, started your early experiences of sports parenting, and your post of you playing cricket in the back garden with your son, and you titled it "Supporting Passion Over Perfection." What was going through your mind when you were watching that? Because the video's great, isn't it?
I wrote support the spark.
Yeah.
energy and persistence conquer all things. And it's just, you can see that love and that energy and that passion that he has for a sport, which I know nothing about. I know not what an over is or a wicket is, or the crease, which is sad as I'm from Yorkshire now. But certainly watching him, relentlessly bowl, imagine himself doing it, cover drives now, and moving the bat and throwing and catching, and visualizing him catching, and he says things like catches win matches. And for me, like, that's just that there is what's important. I think I don't want to shape Bodie into what I think his image should be. I want to help him be his best self. I really want to do that, be a better version of me. So I think finding that passion and watching him doing it, and just being a person who just is dead supportive. And if it takes me to throw 100 balls at him, which I can't do, but I just sort of throw them in there, he creams them over the fence and hits them for six. And yeah, it's encouraged me to I watched India and England in the test, and I'm getting used to the rules, and I go and watch them on a Friday. And yeah, it's a real, I always say that, with the gymnasts, again, it's my learned experience, is that passion and purpose are so important. And yeah, support the spark, support that spark.
Yeah, and where do you think that came from him? Normally you get, particularly in those early stages, don't you, parents who'd maybe done a sport who naturally take their kids to have a first taste of that one. Where did he suddenly pick that up from? Was it just going to a local club? Was it school? Was it someone he'd watched on the TV?
Yeah, I mean, Gemma, my partner, her family have played cricket. Gemma has scored
Okay.
cricket, so there is a bit of a connection there. But in general, I just really thought when my kids were first born that, the first thing would be, I need them to catch, I need them to throw, I need them to kick, to hold things. Like, I would get Evian bottles of water and attach balls to pieces of string and get them to hit stuff. And for me, like, as a sports coach, knowing how good that is for your mind, and also gymnastics is such a complex, tough sport. And so my belief of what young people can do at a very young age is, I have high expectations. So with both of my children, I'm like, right, balance bikes, throwing, catching, kicking, it just really, really, I put a huge emphasis on that. And I love spending hours with them, either indoors, setting things up, or outside. And yeah, and then so Bodhi has an obsession. His first word was ball, because the house was just full of different softballs, spiky balls, colored balls, and basketball things on the wall. And then yeah, he's just taken to anything I've done with him, swimming,
Yeah.
tennis, cricket, football, rugby. He
Yeah.
really enjoys it. But the thing that he's really taken to on a Friday, he just loves going to the cricket club, and
Yeah.
he's just always bowling without a ball. He's just
Or
spinning with
just
a
doing the
ball.
running down the
Yeah,
street and
yeah.
putting the
And
action in.
hits my head with his arm, and
Yeah.
it just drives me. But it doesn't drive me. I love
No.
it. I
Yeah.
absolutely adore it.
I think that's brilliant, and I think we've probably got similar parenting experiences in that idea of getting them into that sort of just general movement, catching, throwing, kicking from a very young age, and it's so important. I look at some people today, when they start in sport, and I was a teacher and coach and saw new people who were coming to me maybe 8, 9, 10, and 11, and there was definitely a drop in fundamental movement skills, I would say, over the last 15 years of doing that. That included swimming as well, the levels of people coming in, at what level they could swim, and then you were doing them, and they're just the movements of even kicking a ball. And it's so important, isn't it? It doesn't have to cost a fortune, does it?
No.
Like you say, you can set it up in a house. Okay, you might want to remove some of your expensive stuff. We paid the price many years ago for smashing a wedding present and a very expensive vase with a sponge ball that didn't go down very well. You might want to remove all your stuff, but it can be done, and it's so good for them, as you say.
Yeah, plastic. I mean, I've had a plasma screen TV with a 3-year-old with a plastic golf club and a plastic ball, and I came back through, and the screen was sort of shattered. And I thought, oh no, maybe that wasn't the best of ideas. But no, I think it's not like swimming. Get them in the pool, armbands, get them to put their face in the water to kick. An hour in the pool, there's so much that you can do. I'm amazed by my youngest, Bella. She's almost swimming, but I think purely because she watches Bodhi. And in the bath they put their goggles on and she puts her head under the water. And I watch the coaches at swimming encouraging them to blow the ball and to push it. Like to
Yeah.
encourage them to get. So I've picked up all those things in order for Bella to have a good experience at swimming. And I think, yeah, there's lots of really cool things you can do as a parent. I actually loved lockdown because I had so much time during that period in order to be creative in a day and set something up that Bodhi skittles, knocking
Yeah.
things down, bowling things. There's so many things you can do in a house or
Yeah.
outdoor, which the kids just, balance bikes. They're absolutely, I mean, it's amazing. Like as soon as they can walk, get a light balance bike, let them, can they stand with it? Can they walk with it? And the patience of that. And then, yeah, by two and a half, three, they can be flying around on this balance bike, going down hills, building confidence, going in and out of cones. It's just,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And I think, we've got to, I suppose that, I don't know, not this perfect world, but the world we create, we're very fortunate, I guess, as well, because of our backgrounds, that we've got some sense of what this maybe potentially looks like. And not everybody has access to certain things. But I think, yeah, the more we can get our kids, yeah, moving, jumping around, throwing things, kicking, like you say, it absolutely vital for what comes next. Interestingly, there with your daughter, I think there's definitely an element of that. See that in your own house, those ones with older siblings who, in many ways, lead the way and who, in many ways, are then really creative. And actually, for the second one that comes along, if they've also got a passion, they've also then got that person to look up to and copy. And if you look at it across the world, generally, not in every case, but generally, the second sibling tends to surpass the first one. Not every time, but I think that it's definitely in their favor.
yeah, she's Bella is so currently I worked hard with Bodhi on sort of failure and try again, smile, laugh, learn, try again. Like it takes a while for them to understand that that's a real superpower in a human being. Like if you make a mistake, it's fine, laugh, forget about it, try again, do it again. And
Yeah,
I've had to really drill that into Bodhi in order for him to think that that's the best, and that is the best way to
yeah,
be.
it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And all fantastic human beings are like that.
Yeah,
And therefore, that just takes a little bit of discipline in order to instill that. So it's fascinating now that my daughter is a perfectionist. She just, the minute she makes a mistake, she will throw the racket or she
yeah,
will refuse to do it again. And so I'm kind of being a lot more patient with Bella in that I'm trying that she, yeah, exactly that. She watches Bodhi, and it's a joy for me to hear Bodhi then say to his sister, "It's okay, Bella, just try again,
yeah.
try again." So he's instilling that in his sister, and
Yeah.
that's a real joy for me to see.
Yeah, it is, and I think that, as you say, I've got a very similar setup with a daughter, very similar that sort of followed behind my son, and like approaches, and we talk to parents about this a lot, and I think there's a couple of things you brought up there. I think our ability as parents to recognise that every child is different, I think, is an important part of that. You're having to be more patient with your daughter. I certainly have to behave very differently with my daughter to how I chat with my son. It's a completely different approach. Um, and I think also that other bit around failure, I think, it's certainly in our parents' talks, and you're talking about developing resilience and helping young people. What's actually changed, I think, a lot, Barry, is our reaction to mistakes, which doesn't help it. Like you say, if we're able to just say, oh, don't worry, just get on with it, to have another go and not make such a big deal of
Yeah.
it. But any form of mistake, disappointment, we're treating it like it can be the worst thing in the world, and as a result we're sending kids emotions all over the place. And actually, hang on, we're all going to make millions of mistakes just like they do at every level of sport, and what's changed is
Shatters
our
your
reaction
self-worth.
to it.
It shatters your self-worth. It really does. If you you punish yourself for failure, or you get frustrated or angry, you don't feel good about yourself. And I think that's really, really important. And I think especially because I've worked so many years in gymnastics, where gymnastics is just and it's kind of inherently like a negative sport. You work hard to gain points,
Yeah.
and then they just take stuff away. You don't actually gain anything, they just take stuff away. That's negative. I think 90% of gymnastics is failure. It's you make a mistake, you land short, you do this, and then you do it again. And there's so many repetitions that if you have the mindset that you are useless and you just can't do it first go, you're never going to
Yeah.
succeed in the sport. And I think watching some of the athletes that I've had so much pleasure in them, make an error, make a mistake at competition. It's fine. It's okay. Move on, move forward,
Yeah.
another competition. Being allowed to make errors and make mistakes because that's just part of the journey. That's just part of learning to be an expert. I think, therefore, now with my youngsters who I want to have high self-worth and high self-esteem, part of that is about seeing failure as an opportunity just for learning. And it's gone, pick up a point, do it again. Eventually, it will become, yeah, just
Yeah.
something that they do just naturally without any
Yeah.
emotion, without any thought of doubt. Because for me personally, when I was a young person, I had very, very low self-worth, low self-esteem, and I would always think about what could happen would go wrong, or very negative, And I think it's only since I've become an adult and I've worked on my self-esteem and understand like where my pride comes from myself, and kind of developed a model as to what my self-esteem is made up of, that I've understood how important that is for confidence. I say to my children, confidence is a superpower. I say that all the time. I say, what's your superpower? They will say confidence. And that for me is making sure that they have high self-worth. Specifically for my daughter, I think that's really important for a young person, female.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And with a teenage daughter at the moment as well, and trying to achieve in sport, I think they have so many challenges, in their school environments, perceptions, what's cool, what isn't cool, social media, all of those things. And actually, you just want them to fit, like you say, you just want them to be confident in what they're doing and feel good about themselves. And I think it probably upsets me the most is when you hear some comments from her that are clearly driven by external factors that you've got no control over. And it just in many ways can make you really sad that that's what the world is.
It's sad and yeah, quite worried for them.
Yeah,
Like I see a lot of individuals, young people that I worry about. I think, well, where will that go? Where will that end?
yeah,
What does your future look like? And yeah, it can be quite frightening because when I was a young person, I would hide all that. You wouldn't have told, you wouldn't have known. You'd be like, oh, he's
yeah,
all right. But internally, I had no self-worth. Internally, I really felt low about myself, and I was very frightened and insecure, and was not ready for the world at all. And so, and I had to grow up very, very quick when I left home at 16, and probably when I had my first child, Jude, I was a child myself. I was only 23, and I wasn't ready for that. And yeah, I've had to do a lot of growing up and a lot of learning with Jude, and but then I think I work with Jude in the fact that he's an actor, and so he's gone with what he's passionate at. He wanted to be an actor. He's doing fantastic. He's pursuing his dream like I did. He's
yeah,
21 years old. He's got a Netflix program, and he's living his dream. So yeah, there are parts of being a father that I feel like I've influenced my eldest son, but not as much as I probably would have hoped to, given my experience when I was a young child. And I guess I'm very fortunate to have this a second opportunity, and just whilst having Jude there, someone that I love and I'm very proud of him, but having this unique opportunity where my children have a school next to the house, and I get to go to their sports clubs, and yeah, I get to be a really positive influence in their life. That's what I'm really grateful for.
yeah. Excellent. I'm just going to go back to that supporting the passion, I think, and the dream one. I've had to live out very recently a son who, signed for a Category 1 academy at the age of 9, spent his early childhood playing Liverpool, Man City,
Wow.
Man United, every did all those things. Was released at 12. Still played at a really high level for a number of years, just outside um, academy football. And he this year has decided to take a different path, that he's going to concentrate on his exams. But he's also a single figure golfer, and he's set himself the challenge of getting to scratch. Now, I think that's very bold. What scares me a little bit, and obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, is he was never as motivated by his football as he is for his golf. And I pushed his sort of football and his cricket and some of those things that we did. And it is him that drives the journey of, can you take me to the golf course? Can you do it? And he would spend 12 hours a day there if he could, without any shadow of a doubt. And is clearly passionate about it. But that makes it quite scary that the first 15 years, it's like, oh, go on. We did introduce him to golf, and you do try and give them variety. We've got to be so careful, haven't we? Because probably in the long run, if it doesn't come from them, it becomes really tricky. I'm not going to say that there aren't some really top performers who are still at the top, even though they maybe don't like it or didn't even want to do it. They're just quite good at it, because that does exist as well. But ultimately, really, they've got to drive that journey, particularly when they become teenagers, don't they? And you must see that through those junior pathways.
Yeah, my favorite quote of all time is a quote by T. Lawrence, and it says that all men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their mind wake in the day to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act upon their dreams with open eyes to make them possible. The quote is about visualizing and bringing to life what it is you want and what it is you desire. And I think when you see a child that's passionate, perhaps about golf or cricket or whatever the sport is, I work hard to say, tell me what it is you're going to achieve and describe it in the future. Where I'll be on the PGA Tour, I win this, I sink the putt on the 18th, and my dad cheers with me, my family's there, and they're able to. That's a good clue for me. Like if I said to Bodie, which team are you going to play for football, Bodie? He'd be like Huddersfield Town. And what will it be like? Tell me the day that you're going to come on the pitch. And he can say it, he can speak about it. He can anything. I think that strong, active visualization with feeling and emotion, which makes the mom and dad smile or the children smile. I think that's a really, really unique thing that comes from individuals. And certainly when I was a gymnast, no, sorry, when I was a young person, all I fantasized about was what I found was gymnastics. I think it could have been any sport. I think it was a coach that I was close to, and he was a good man. He was a kind man, and I think he showed me empathy. And I think that's what my hook was, because family life wasn't great. So I think it was gymnastics. I became passionate about it, and to be honest, that's all I thought about. I just would dream about it, imagine myself at the Olympics, imagine myself training every day. And I think if, as a parent, you can find those things that, that true, yeah, that spark, that creativity, that imagination, fuel that and get them into that, because that is so important. And it's not never too late. I think, people can do amazing things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You just maybe have to change the parameters a little bit, Barry, as we head towards 50. We're just going to have a look at how we can do the over 50s bit, I think. Certainly in my case. Now you get to work with some of the best gymnasts in the world.
Yeah.
And it's all about the environment, I know, for you in what you create to help them thrive as both performers and as people. What have you brought into the environment, or what do you deem as important? I know some of your gymnasts, and they've helped me out in a couple of talks, and the environment, they all talk very positively. What is it in that environment that you're trying to create to help them thrive?
I always say never underestimate the power of having fun. So regardless, yes, what I do is serious. What I do is goal driven. I have targets, I have pressures, but we always enjoy our time together. I think that's the main thing. There have been times in my career where I've created environments which are just about results and success, as in I perceive success as in medals. And what I've found is that I would go on that process and the outcome would be a medal, but then I did enjoy the process. So the outcome and the medal felt good for 5 minutes, and actually, me and my team never enjoyed any of it. So really, I'm very process focused now in our environments. In that, yeah, let's make moments and memories together. Don't get me wrong, we want to do well, we want to be successful, but I work hard to understand what does success look like for them as individuals. What does it look like for us as a team? And then, what challenges might we encounter? And how will we deal with those challenges? And I think when you have environments where you get those things aligned and set, then yeah, you have a wonderful time and you can still have the same outcome, but you're going to be left with magical moments, memories, smiles, pictures, emotion, as well as
Yeah.
tough times, eudaimonia, grafting, working together, suffering together.
Yeah.
And it's a much better experience. And I guess it's just through my lived experiences of maybe getting it wrong and making mistakes as a young coach to now being armed with, yeah, some ideas on how you create good environments.
Yeah, and there's a couple of big things for me. I'm big on experience at the moment. Those people that have lived it, been through it, but then who also have evolved through it. It's no good. So you're not experienced if you've done the same thing for 50 years, but those that have lived it, seen what's worked, evolved, thought, oh God, actually I need to adapt that, need to do it. And you end up in quite a nice place. The other bit around fun and enjoyment, and you've expanded a little bit on that. I meet a lot of parents, and we just had this in the States recently, and talking to them about what is their perception of a good environment, what is their perception of a good coaching session, what is their perception of a good coach. And it's actually quite scary what they perceive those to actually be. So if I take an example of a coach who is always shouting, really passionate, joysticking kids around fields, instructive all the time, letting them make no decisions themselves. A lot of parents think, oh, he's a really good coach, he cares about our kid. As opposed to the other one who's been really thoughtful, giving really good feedback at the thing and all of those things. Yet he can be described as lacking passion. Now, I think we've got this weird thing around fun and enjoyment. Again, it's something we talk a lot about in sessions with parents, is that I think some parents feel, well, how can we be achieving if there's if it's fun and enjoyment? It's too flaky, which we know it isn't. But they do struggle with that concept and idea. But in fun and enjoyment, and certainly in the enjoyment piece, there is a lot of hard work. There's a lot of obstacles, isn't there? There's a lot of things to overcome. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering. Now, not pain and suffering in painting really bad pictures in your mind, but that is the reality of trying to be a performer.
Yeah, a marathon is painful. Like a
Yeah,
marathon is not enjoyable until you do it. But the
yeah,
joy that you feel at the end of it,
yeah,
that's like a training session. I'm sure sometimes when I frame a training session with my team, they think, oh, that's going to be really tough. But hey, we've all bought into it. We've all said we're going to support each other. And if we overcome challenges, we're going to, support, get through it together. But the enjoyment at the end of it and the fun when we succeed, and you'll remember that suffering together. I think that's kind of what I mean. I think it boils down to, like, as a good coach is understands autonomy. They understand, perhaps when there is no autonomy, it's kind of I'm the leader and I'm the one who's got the most lived experience and I know what's right for you guys and I'm trying to be not be kind, but do the right thing in order to prepare you for this
yeah,
pressurized environment, which gymnastics is a hugely pressurized environment, which is going to be tough and we're going to be hard and we want to do well because you've got targets that you guys want to hit. You don't want to let your teammates down. So sometimes there is no autonomy because I set the plan and the coach is following. But other times that scale, that frequency moves, and a good coach is able to complete autonomy. Like they're driving their program, or it's shared, and it's just moving that dial up
Yeah.
and down all the time.
I want to jump in on this because I think this is really important, and I have this challenge out with coaches and everything else. If you look at coaching today and you look at the world of social media and you look at these ideas for what the perfect environment looks like, clearly driven by people who are sat in an office and have never actually been on the ground and the realities of it, you've just summed that up beautifully, because some days you can give complete autonomy to your young athletes. Some days you'll give them a bit of autonomy. Some days as a coach, you're saying, do you know what? This is what we're doing. Because
Yeah.
I've decided, and I have this with a lot of coaches at the moment, back yourself on what you're doing. You can't fit every strand of coach education into one session because everything has to have context attached to it. So being aware of all these things, the environments you're trying to create, you are trying to, I don't know, embed throughout the programs, but you can't do it 100% of the time, every time to every letter of the law, because that's not realistic.
No, it's not. It's not possible. Also, because
Oh,
you're not with them. I'm not with them 100% of the time. So there will be times where I'm having to trust them because they're back in their club and I don't know what they're doing. There'll be other times when we come together for a 2 week build up where yeah, you're going to have to be direct,
yeah,
or different times in the year, different situations. You just have to always, and that does not just gymnasts, that can be members of my team that I line manage, and there'll be different outcomes. Too much autonomy, you maybe get things done quick, but you'll make mistakes because there's no one checking them. Not any autonomy at all is not very good, really, because too much control.
yeah,
But sometimes it is necessary,
yeah.
and then different individuals will require different things. I have athletes, gymnasts, members of staff who do not like to be left
No,
to do what they want to do. They don't want to be like, can you just come up with something creative? They'd rather be told, this is what the brief is, this is what I need you to do, and this is what I need you to do it by.
yeah.
So I think it's just finding that, being aware of what the outcomes could be by moving that autonomy gauge, and then knowing when to step in and lead and when to allow people to express themselves.
Yeah, I think that's brilliantly put. It's one of the best descriptions I've heard of it recently, is moving up the dials of all these things that we know make good environments and good coaching. And we're going to turn those up and down, like you say, depending on where we maybe are, what it means for the particular individual in front of us, and also what's the priority on
Yeah.
that given day. I was thinking back over team talks, and I coached a couple of national title winning sides, teenagers, rugby sevens, and I was telling this story um, the other week in a quarter final of a game, and you think about your coaching, and I remember a first half of a game where the penalty count was massively against us, and I walked onto the pitch at half time, and we were struggling, and it was a quarter final. And I walked past the referee, and I think it took 20 years of experience for me to say, I said, "Oh, is there anything you want me to talk to them about? Because they seem to be giving away a lot of penalties." I thought I'd do it nicely. And they said something. And I started to say something back. And there was just something that went off and said, "Shut your mouth, go and do what you need to do and leave it alone, because this is going to be worse if you say anything else." And you talk about those experiences and the time where you maybe would have said more, or you maybe would have adjusted. And the reason I'm telling the story is the next bit was really important, because there was no autonomy in that halftime team talk. It was very clear that this is what needs to happen
Yeah.
if we want to get to a semi-final. There was no discussions asking anybody how they felt about it or whatever. You had a minute and a half, and this is what we're going to do with real clarity.
And
And
to have that, but I think to have that discussion there, it's like you have to remove the emotion of it. Because
yeah,
sometimes, like, it's like how you approach that is really important. And I've learned that because I could be quite passionate and rah, like we need to
yeah,
do this. And
yeah,
sometimes in that moment, that's not what children or gymnasts or people
no,
need. It's almost sometimes now I'm a lot more diplomatic in that I think having that going away and saying, hey, as a team, we all agree this, and this, and this, and this is how we're going to act. This is what's what keeps us together. Now, yesterday or after the penalty shoot, I observed this, and you weren't listening, you weren't doing, these are the things which we all agreed to do. Therefore, there's a lack of trust now as us as a team and as human beings. So, what are we going to do to work that through?
yeah,
And that there then kind of allows them to reflect and to feedback as to, and for them to think about the mistakes that they made and think, yeah, I've let myself down, the team down, and yeah, you can put your arm around them. And I think that's a really useful thing that yeah, it's a tool that someone showed me, trust, alignment, and autonomy. Like how you, and it's for me, it's really sparked a lot of thought for me over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, where coaching has come under the spotlight, specifically in gymnastics, or of coaches perhaps being dictators and being way too much autonomy, and the gymnasts having no say,
yeah,
and therefore I've had to. It's something that I've never supported. I've always wanted buy-in from everyone. I always collaborate and have feedback, and I've worked really hard to to work hard with even 9-year-olds to get
yeah,
feedback and stuff. So this new tool and a new way of sort of thinking and to create an environment and a culture which is successful and process and outcome focused has been really, really useful. So I'm still learning and I'm still moving the dial
yeah,
myself. I will be. I've been away on holiday, so I have no autonomy. I have, their guys in my team and the gymnasts. I'm hoping that they've been working, and we have a world championship trial and next weekend, and yeah, I will flip into a different mode sort of for the next couple of months on the build up for the world championships, where yeah, I will be flipping that dial back down to sort of myself driving what the program needs and what my team need.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And again, it's context, isn't it? A couple of months into a world championships may look very different to 6 months after one of those major events. That's the other thing, isn't it? When you talk about people trying to say there's black and white solutions, these things are ever evolving and are forever different. And that's the skill of programs and coaching, isn't it? Knowing when to do what at the right times.
Completely, and especially when I'm working with creative people. These are gymnasts are creative, they're extroverted, introverted, they are performers. These guys work for 8 weeks to deliver a routine, which is 30 seconds or probably a minute long under pressure on a stage where you get one chance, where
Yeah,
everything is stacked against you. The time, the judges, the pressure, the crowd, the noise. You can't simulate it. And you get one chance. You might have done that routine, 100 times clean. It will have taken you 8 weeks to get that fit, similar to boxing. And then you get that one shot. So yeah, these people are very unique individuals. So
yeah.
to coach them or to get close to them, to have a connection with them, to have rapport with them takes a real skill.
Yeah, it's amazing watching them. I do have to say, I mean, I travel around a lot of sports, been up close to some of those gymnasts and watching, and I guess it's that for me, it's also that persistence, which is something we've already talked about, is their ability just to persist in striving for perfection, to keep persisting and persisting and over and over and over again. Um, it's such a key trait. You don't want young people thinking, "Oh, well, it doesn't work now.
Yeah.
this doesn't work." We've got to try and help them understand. But to get something or to achieve something does require, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I suppose society isn't helping that now, Barry, is it? Where everything can be quite instant gratification, can come quite instantly. If you want to be good at sport, the reality is it's pretty long, pretty tough, pretty arduous. There's an awful lot to get through. There are not many shortcuts, is there?
No, it requires plus one optimism. And I think an analogy I always work hard with the my gymnasts is if you had a scale, a set of scales with a 10 kilo weight on one end and nothing on the other end, if you were to throw 10p pieces at the weights on the other side, you would keep throwing 10p pieces, which are goals or opportunities or hours trained. Eventually you won't know when, you will not have a clue, but one 10p, that weight will move.
Yeah.
Two more 10p's, that weight will move even more. And there'll be one more 10p where it'll just go bang,
Yeah.
and you've achieved it. But you never know.
No.
And, I think all things are difficult before they're easy. And I think it's a really important thing to teach young people that. And one thing I've had to be resilient throughout all my life, and the one thing that has got me to where I am today is optimism. Really, I'm an optimistic person.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic that, no matter how bad things can be, there's always been a point in my life where it's got better. No matter how hard it was, how challenging there was, but I think that's optimism is so important. It's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and I think you've just got me thinking about a quote I read the other week. I thought that's quite cool. Hope is the last thing to go or the last thing to die.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. If you keep believing, keep hoping, it just keeps you striving, doesn't it? And I think that's so important for all of us, not just for young
And
people.
people sometimes can find that a bit cliche, autism,
Yeah,
but
it's not.
it's like it's not. It's really not. It's like I've had athletes and gymnasts who, suffered very like horrendous knee injuries or horrendous, accident where, they've been on the top of their game and they're about to, move into the senior team and the Olympics and they've had a devastating injury where showing them that no matter how bad things are in life, a good thing to do when you wake up is to write down three things that you are optimistic about or you are grateful for. And that might be that, you made it downstairs to have a cup of tea, or, it was sunny outside and you go out for half an hour and just, you set yourself the target of reading three chapters of a book and you actually managed to do it, or you rang an old friend. There are always something optimistic for any human being in any situation, I believe. And
Yeah.
I think it's my lived experience of some very, very challenging times in my life where I really had to think a lot about finding some sort of optimism in that moment in order to get to the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just conscious of the time, Barry, we've gone off on all kinds of tangents. I'm just looking back at our title, Developing Confidence and Self-Esteem. I think we've probably talked a little bit about that. We've then gone off on tangents, which is absolutely fine, which is pretty normal for this podcast. I just want to bring it back to the self-worth piece, I guess, as our final part of this, because we all want people to feel good about themselves, young performers, what they do. Sometimes in sport, though, that direct correlation between what they're achieving as performers and them as people, sort of, I guess, crossing the divide can cause problems, and it is really complex because obviously a large part of their identity is gymnastics. So there is gonna be some crossover. It's not just going to be as easy as saying, well, that's there and that's there. You've got to separate them. Yes, you have, but it's probably more difficult than that. What do you think we can do to support young performers as parents and coaches, even on just that whole self-worth piece and trying to separate the two?
We're working really hard at British Gymnastics now to have gymnastic plans meetings with our young, from very, very young junior athletes up to seniors, where we develop them as people. It's a live, training, compete model. So it's not just your gymnastics plan and where you want to go and what your aspirations are. It's about you as a person. How's your family life? What are you interested in outside of gym? What are your GCSEs looking like? You're going to get 3, you're going to get 8. Like, what do you want to do outside gym? Can you oh, I've just read a book, I can cut. Like having a young person that's able to come online with their parents and their coach and me and some of my wonderful support team, and yeah, you can question them and they can talk openly. Initially, it might feel quite difficult, but you can ask them questions and they can open up about their lives. That will create what I would coin as a self-esteem house. So my self-esteem house has four walls. It's perhaps rooted in what I struggle with. So one thing, part of my self-worth is money. I never had much money as a child, and there was a lot of debt and a lot of stress. And one thing I'm not very good at is making sure that I want to provide for my family, but it's a stress of mine. Is that can I do it? How do I keep forward? How do I make sure my family has a holiday, that we go to Cornwall, that we have nice things? And
Yeah.
therefore, for me, when I take my eye off the ball of that, or I'm not developing myself, I have low self-worth. Where when I'm organized and I'm not being wasteful and I'm planning for my future, I have high self-worth, self-pride. So for me, that sort of weakness, that thing that I don't like, I work on. Second wall is my family. It's clearly family means everything to me. So, making sure that I make time for my partner, my children, Jude, Bodie, Bella. I read to them, I spend time with them, I listen to them. That's massive. I have to have that. Third wall is work. It's work. It's my life, gymnastics and my job. I love it. And so therefore I have to give the right amount of time to that. And when I'm doing well at work, when I'm organized and I'm doing podcasts or I'm doing things for people, like I feel good. I feel happy about myself.
Yeah.
And then the final part of my self-esteem is just me. Am I looking after me? Am I developing myself? Am I sharing? Am I being vulnerable? Am I keeping myself fit? Being careful with how much I drink, like how much what I eat, am I exercising? When I do those things and am I sleeping, I feel good, I
Yeah.
feel happy. And it's making sure that it's taken me a while to understand that those four walls, I feel really good and I can handle anything. And it's just making sure that perhaps that sometimes when I'm not focusing on that, or I'm not thinking about myself, or I'm spending too much time at work. Okay, I need back home. This summer has been quite chaotic with the children, and I'm missing work. So it's
Yeah.
just there's no balance. It's just making sure I do equal parts of it. So self-esteem in in young people, I want them to understand what makes them proud, what makes you proud about yourself. That is what self-esteem is. It's and I think it's genuine. It can't be fake, like, oh yeah, I feel really good. Like I want young people to be able to come online and talk about what makes them proud. And I think from my observation, all of the gymnasts that I see that have performed well, been hugely successful, have all demonstrated high self-worth. The gymnasts that have enjoyed training, but probably struggled in pressured situations or in competition, I think had low self-worth. And therefore, for me, as a head national coach, I intend to develop these human beings as people in order to get a performance gain.
Brilliant. I mean, I love that, and I think that's probably a really good way to finish this episode. I think one final, note for me for parents, then, just bearing in mind what you've talked about walls, getting kids to talk, is probably our role is to try and facilitate really good conversations with our kids, make sure that they have other interests. Don't always just talk about that sport as the only topic of conversation. Don't fall into the trap of saying that you love them and you're proud of them, but it's always linked to a specific outcome. And many parents I talk to do that not deliberately because they're trying to cause harm, but they think, oh my goodness, yeah, every time I'm saying a lot of these things is based around whether they've achieved something, whether it be at school or whether it be in their sport, rather than just loving them for who they are and what they're doing, and them as people. So that we've talked about lots of things in today's episode. Barry, absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.